Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Anna Popovich with Humanist Canada, and I will moderate today's conversation. This webinar will be 60 minutes in length, and we will take questions at the end of the presentation. We will try a different format today. So if you have a question for the speaker, instead of submitting it with the Q&A tool, please raise your hand and I will ask you to unmute yourself. Our topic today is the crisis of democracy in India, and we're joined by Milan Pandya, who recently relocated to Canada from India. Milan is a teacher, trainer, and educator in the field of critical thinking and argumentation, English language teaching, and communication. He currently holds the position of Vice President of Advancement at Critical Thinking Solutions, and he has more than 10 years of teaching experience and has trained over 30,000 people, in critical thinking and argumentation around the world. He has been invited to teach at numerous universities and institutions across India. Milan's research areas include communication skills, literature, philosophy, critical thinking, logical persuasion, and ethics. He has a BA and MA degrees in English literature, master philosophy degree in English language teaching, and is completing his PhD in online teaching, communicative competence, and critical thinking. Thanks so much, Milan, for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. So at the outset, I definitely want to thank all the people who have joined over here, because even if you're here in Canada, this is in the midst of the wonderful and beautiful sunny summer that we're talking about and the long weekend. So you have decided to be part of this particular event itself is worthy of my debt to you. And also, if you're joining from India, I know that this is past over midnight. So again, many thanks for joining in this one. A very particular and pertinent, let's say, issue that we're going to be discussing today. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that I'm also deeply honored to be contributing to the vision and mission and values of Humanist Canada, and the one which directly reconciles with my professional and personal endeavor is the pursuit of critical thinking. And as it's been noted from my introduction, that critical thinking is something which I've devoted my life to. So when that's the value been espoused by the Humanist Canada, I tend to take immense interest in persuading that. And having said that, what I like to do today is the following. When we look at the current, let's say, status of democracy in India, we need to also look at what India stands for, and in terms of what India is known for as well. Because only when there's a deep understanding of how democracy has sort of organically, taken shape in the purview of the identity of India, one would begin to realize how right now, in a very grandiose way, one can call it the mutilation of Indian soul that is happening right now. And what I want to link with is this. So talking about democracy, talking about the freedom of speech, talking about the secular values, I think it's not just, let's say, important to talking about the values of critical thinking, but also in terms of what has been taken for granted as well. So in a way, if one were to look at the understanding of the richness of the tradition of argument that has always been there in India, one begins to understand, or rather take this view for granted, that it's been rather a gift given by the Westerners. So as if, at the year of independence, when the Britishers were leaving, apart from giving the different gifts, as we would call it, right, they would also, let's say, give us the gift of democracy as well. But that particular perspective is far from reality, right? Like, India has always had the historical root of democracy, and it's worth considering with the connection of the public argument, and through the temptation to attribute to the Indian commitment to democracy simply to the British influence is going to mar our understanding of the healthy heterodoxy and the natural state of affairs that's always there in India. So that's basically what's going to be my argument. And in that particular way, we begin to understand that at what tragic level the particular state of democracy is in shambles in the current state of times. So when we talk about the long tradition of public arguments with tolerance of intellectual heterodoxy, it's very important to look at also the understanding that it's not the non-Western democracy which includes its popular endorsement following the independence from the British Raj. And contrary to the many countries where democracy has intermittently made cameo appearance, so at the time, let's say, if one were to argue that democracy was always, let's say, something that India received from Britishers, then why did let's say the other countries which also received the independence at the same time did not embrace democracy as well? So that perspective is very important to keep in mind. Also, at the same time, in my experience, when I teach and take forward the whole pursuit of teaching critical thinking, that's exactly what I'm doing in terms of dealing with the public reasoning part. And also, what's been very evident to notice is that the whole growth of this Hindu nationalist political style of governance part, and how it sort of brings the whole understanding of even Hinduism into more of the dark ages of let's say what was Christianity at one particular point as well. And therefore, it's also going to be very pertinent for us to, in this particular talk, understand the difference between Hinduism and Hindutva as well. That right now, what we see in terms of India very evidently proclaiming its religious identity, it has never been the case looking at it from very religious or let's say spiritual point of view. And also, in terms of looking at what even Hinduism espouses for, uh, it has never been away from the tolerance and acceptance. Like that's one of the things which has always been, let's say, quite different from the other religions in one way to argue that it has never dominated, it has never asserted any need to dominate in the wider spectrum of things as well. So here's what we're going to look at. Uh, a very striking example to note as to how the mutilation of Indian soul has happened would be to look at what happened last year during the Gandhi Jayanti, the 2nd of October, which is also celebrated as International Day of Nonviolence. At that particular, I mean, on that particular day, when you have the Twitter trend, one of the Twitter trends that was trending on that particular day was not just about the non-violence and the values that it espouses, but it was rather more about celebrating the Godse's ideology, Godse being the person who assassinated Gandhi, and how his particular view is seemingly more relevant right now is what the people who wanted to set, let's say, set the trend wanted to let's say talk about. Also, in my talk, I would like to talk about how, because of this failure in upholding the democratic values, India has been sort of rather, not rather, I think, deeply unsuccessful in terms of thwarting the apparent dangers of the second wave of the pandemic. And situation, as the world knows, isn't, let's say, getting any better as of now. And definitely then we're going to, let's move forward to the question answer part as well. So here's what we need to look at. There has been this particular wish for the Hindu nationalist, majoritarian, autocratic, undemocratic, non-secular, let's say, thinking to change the constitution and kind of have a disdain for the secular and democratic values for it. One of the ministers has openly, Mr. Hegde has openly said that the constitution needs to be changed from time to time. And then we have come to that. And those claiming to be secular and progressive do not have any identity of their parents and their blood. And one will get self-respect through such identity only. And this is not, let's say, just one person talking about the desire of making changes in the constitution and make it more suitable for the Hindu, let's say, nationalist, let's say, majoritarian as well. One of the ways, one can argue how this particular loss has already happened is that with the arrival of this pseudo and hyper nationalist movement, uh, in India, somehow being religious and being nationalist, and even in nationalist in a very specific purview of how this particular party wants you to assert your nationalism, this has come as almost as a litmus test. So, philosophically speaking, Hinduism, or let's say being spiritually religious in that particular sense, would want you to discard the other parts of identity and then try to embrace and immerse into your personal identity. While this particular moment, for the sake of for the sake of homogenizing it for the political moment and mobilizing of religious in the service of political power, it wants you to put your religious identity at the forefront. And there's heresy and hubris in thinking about it, that it's actually our job to protect the gods and not the vice versa, that it's a God's job to protect us. And also there's one more thinking which is aligned with that, is that all religion need to be co-opted in the single homogeneous power structure. And this is very particularly interesting to understanding of Hinduism and the Hindutva, this particular part, which is also going to be core in terms of understanding where does this ideology come in the whole picture. Now, there's a falsification and distortion of Hinduism, which needs to be understood by Hindu nationalist movement, which is that the fact that Hinduism doesn't have a collective act of worship. So that's exactly what they would want to sort of imbibe from different religions and also different moments where even let's say if you were to look at the time of World War in Germany, why there was this lust and desire for asserting this racial dominance. And in Hinduism, it isn't let's say quite easy to do it. Why? Because you basically have a freedom and choice of choosing God from millions of options which are out there. And there isn't, let's say, like a Sunday prayer where you're supposed to just do that thing, or let's say you have, prayers or namaz that you do 5 times. No, there's no collective act of worship that is really important to be understood. And also, there's no one sacred text as well, right? Right now, if you were to understand the movement, everyone's been getting hyper, let's say, active about Ramayana being the most sacred text. Now, Ramayana is one of the most important texts, no doubt about that, but it doesn't become the only sacred text. Or in terms of in Hinduism, one can very well argue that why not Bhagavad, why not let's say Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, why not Rig Veda for that matter as well, right? It's not monolithic as religion. It's a polytheistic religion. And also there's one more but pertinent fact to understand along with that, that there's this why Ram? Okay, why not Shiva, or why not let's say other gods? Because if you were to look at, let's say, how diverse and rich India it is in terms of cultural, traditional, and religious understanding, you got different choices depending on where you are looking at. So if you were to look at, I mean, if you're in Bengal, why not Kali? Okay, if let's say you are in southern part of India, why not Yelappa? Right? So why just one particular god? Why just let's say this pursuit of having this one particular god by which the solidifying of Hindu identity can be made is one of the projects of Hindutva through which one can understand that why there's been this sense of derailing from the project as well. And also in terms of it's not as if it's a renaissance moment for the Hinduism as well. No, the whole production of knowledge in this particular realm is which is supposed to be to relieve you of thinking, while in this particular part you would be called anti-national if you have any questions about that. So this is exactly where the hyper nationalism and ultra religious, let's say, Hindutva-led thinking is going to want you to kind of even have the certificate of you being the nationalist in a sense. And I mean, it has never happened in the history of, let's say, India in its independence for the more than 70 years that the individuals were asked to produce some sort of proof of nationalism, right? I mean, if I were to, let's say, ask you that, do you have a certificate which proves the nationalistic thoughts and values that you have? and everyone would have it, right? I mean, that's something which sort of goes without saying. But this is the time. These are the dark moments where one has to produce, and it has to be in alignment of the kind of thinking that the current party in power, which is BJP, is to sort of think about it, right? So it's going to be very important to understand all these aspects, and also I'm going to talk about the major movements, especially the one which have just happened in the recent history. Say, for example, the whole CAA and NRC movement. So CAA would be the Citizenship Amendment Act, which has now been turned into the bill, and it's very interesting to understand not just on its own, but also with the government's desire to also implement NRC, which is National Registration of its Citizens. So India's always had this particular identity of giving refuge to the people who have been persecuted for religious or ethnic or let's say national related reasons as well. And more than just acknowledging it, one would find from the study of history is that it has given home to it. So Jews, when they were persecuted from Jerusalem, they came and they found the home over here. Christians, Muslims, Parsis, you name it. Okay, you name any religion, and India, at some point of India's history, you would find that it has always been given this particular shelter to that. And therefore, there have always been, let's say, laws about how India's citizenship would be given to those who would need. Now, what this particular act seeks to do is something like this. Uh, so, according to this particular act, from the three neighboring countries, naming Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, if you happen to be belonging to one of the six religions, and that is Hindu, Christian, Parsi, Buddhist, Jain, and Jews, uh, then only, and if you're religiously persecuted, then you can seek political asylum. Then you can seek then you can seek the then you can actually be the Indian citizen through this particular law. And this particular law very purposefully excludes the Muslims out of it. And it is definitely some sort of in a way distortion of let's say the very secular tenets of the Indian constitution as well, because if one were to look at the Indian constitution, the words it doesn't even, let's say, just like the constitution that you have of United States of America mentioning in God we trust, it doesn't even mention God, not alone let's say mentioning a particular God, right? And in that particular way, it wants to provide a sort of a sanctuary, and it wants to provide this free ground for people to propagate whatever religion they want to believe in, and they want to let's say further about that. So when you have a bill like CAA, it comes in direct violation of the constitution value as well. But more than that, it's sinister in its another approach as well. It's not just the CA, but the combination of CA and NRC, which is really that's interesting to look at, because with the National Register of Citizen, it wants all the citizens of India to produce their evidence of their their forefathers living in India, and then producing the documents which can prove that they have always been the national citizens of this particular country. Now, this is extremely problematic for many reasons. And to briefly talk about the fact that, like in India, even given the birth certificate wasn't so popular until 80s, and especially the downtrodden, let's say, the class, which would be marred by the natural calamities and other things, would not be able to, let's say, provide would not be able to provide any sort of evidence of that, and therefore, uh, let's say all the other religions would be able to use the point of CAA to receive the nationality, but obviously, let's say one particular group of people, which is let's say Muslims, would not be able to get any sort of let's say advantage in this particular part. Just before the first pandemic, there were widespread protests all around the country, mainly by the group of people who are religiously, let's say, targeted by that, and it also received the human rights experts urging India to release the anti-CA protesters as well, because I mean, more than hundreds or 200, let's say, people have been apprehended and they were being jailed in the particular protests of CA and NRC. So this and then the corona, let's say, obviously became the most, let's say, important thing that the world has to look into. Therefore the protest did not, let's say, receive its much attention. But the way the desire has come to provide to sort of muzzle the protester, and anything any action which in terms of seeks to question the government, being labeled as anti-national and then being labeled as the sympathizer of the, let's say, Pakistan, or any of the other, such abuses, right, is one of the characteristics of the embedded ideology of the party which is in power right now. And in terms of being able, in terms of asserting its religious, let's say, identity, it's going to be very important for all of us to look at this one particular example. So this, in many ways, would look so similar to what has happened in US and the Trump's era as well. Uh, One would argue that there have been, uncanny similarities between the way in which, let's say, Trump eroded the tenets of democracy, and in the same way, let's say, India sort of is on the same path. However, there have been certain differences at the same time as well. While the religion has been used in order to sort of coerce people into not being critical in their thinking part, and not being rational, not being logical, and not being scientific. Uh, at least what was good in, let's say, USA, was that the other institutions which would uphold the democratic values did not collapse, such as, let's say, free press or judiciary, or let's say the fact that the election would be conducted in a fair and free particular way as well. And if you want if one were to talk about simply the free press part, uh, this would be just one of the examples of how the media has somehow completely surrendered to please the supreme leader, as he would like to be called, and how he would and how the party is just doing the amazing things only. And I'd loosely translate, let's say, all these particular points of debate done by mainstream media in terms of what it was all about. So, Dunya Boli Modi Modi, it means the world is chanting Modi Modi. The world is talking about that. International Khiladi, international players. Chand pe hoga Modi, which means, let's say, on moon, there would be chanting of Modi Modi. And Dunya mein number one, PM Modi. PM Modi is world's most favorite prime minister. New supreme leader, Modi, the global leader, our Pradhan Vishwaka Sultan, our leader, world's Sultan and vaccine guru. Now, this is again, let's say, I'm going to talk about, let's say, the mismanagement of the second wave of COVID a little bit later, but this also contributes to the fact that as to how it's been, how media has totally submitted its will to it. And there has been two particular things. Now, India has slipped into the World Freedom Index, and it's right now in 2021, the ranking is at 145th out of around 160 or 165 countries. And either and it's out there possibly because there's one section of mainstream media like this, which has also been called as Godi media or lap dog media, which doesn't want to, let's say, ask any critical questions to the government, which rather wants to ask all the pertinent questions to the opposition. And it's also very, let's say, paradoxical, and something which is very shameful to kind of even mention, that you have India, which is considered as the largest democracy in the world. Well, US being the oldest democracy, India is definitely the largest democracy in the world. Uh, that particular country, which is known for its democratic values, has a prime minister right now who has not who has not held a single press conference since he came onto the power, which is in the year 2014. And not just that, uh, he would be very selective in giving the interviews to only the pet channels. And obviously, when the interviews are there, he would want the questions to be to be known in advance. And there have been multiple times where that's also been revealed as well. And even when you look at the questions which are asked by the journalist to him, or to the other, let's say, important members of the party, the questions will be something like this: that do you keep a purse or not? Right? How do you eat mangoes? Do you cut it, or do you just eat it in a raw manner? And you've done so much. Why do you not get tired? Do you use some tonic or not? So this is absolutely, let's say, uh, shameful, and in a way sickening, to a sense that in democracy, one of the important pillars that you would call is a free press would want to hold the leaders accountable, has completely collapsed and it's submitted its will to it. And while, as we would remember that at the time of Trump's era, you would have Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, uh, kind of keeping a tab on the number of lies, Trump would have, let's say, made so far. While in India, I mean, forgetting anything about that, but that, let's say, they would also, I mean, far from being able to, let's say, counting the number of lies, let's say, the current prime minister would have, made so far. Uh, it would rather celebrate something so banal as how many times the prime minister has clapped during the budget in the parliament, and it would literally be the talking point in the mainstream media as well. And how the media also plays a pivotal role in terms of furthering government's agenda of saving the image of the prime minister at all cost. Say, for example, if one were to look at the difference between these two journalist pieces, right? One is the Time and one is India Today. Just look at the language. Just look at how this particular, let's say, language plays a very pivotal role in targeting the narrative in the mind of people as well. So on one hand, this in the Time magazine cover clearly blames Modi and says that how Modi failed us, while this one has the question about who is to blame and what is to be done. Obviously, the current, let's say, regime, current government is to be blamed for that, and no one else. So in a way, it's very evident and important to look at the way in which the press has somehow defeated the democratic values, and it has somehow just given this surplus to the idea of having this majoritarian view, and also certain channels just being outrightly communal as well. And apart from that, let's say, if one were to look at certain laws which has been also made in the recent past, so laws like cow protection bill, or even the laws like love jihad, is very evident. And talking about love jihad is going to be very interesting. Why? Because uh, so I'm part of this particular book which has been written about the conspiracy theory. And in that, when we were looking at the situation in India as to what sort of conspiracies have been very famous, this whole concept of love jihad becomes so exclusive and unique in terms of this being an example of a conspiracy theory being converted into a law. So, what is love jihad, by the way? So, it's kind of a thinking that Muslims in India, by the way, Muslims which are in minority, more than 83% of population, proclaims itself as Hindu in its identity. So, Muslims in India would have the singular mission of adding to their population in every possible way they can. And in doing so, not only they would want to have, let's say, produce so many children, but also at the same time, they would also want to coerce and make innocent, gullible, poor Hindu girls, make them fall in love with them. And they receive funding for that. Somehow the money comes from Saudi countries, and the good-looking, handsome, well-built, let's say, muscular boys are selected for that. They are given resources like bike and mobile phones and whatnot. and then their singular job is to lure innocent, let's say, Hindu girls into that. Now, there have been certain, let's say, landmark, let's say, incidents about that as well. But all the incidents which have been looked into so far about the so-called this, allegations of love jihad, uh, not a single case, or not a single, let's say, proper case which has been, able to, let's say, been brought about in front of the judiciary, which can actually talk volumes about this being the real phenomenon. Uh, Basically, with this particular conspiratorial thinking, uh, currently 3 to 4 states have already passed on the anti-conversion laws. Now, according to these anti-conversion laws, if a Muslim, let's say, boy wants to get married to a, let's say, Hindu girl, they have to put out a no. They have to, first of all, let's say, provide this particular proposal for that, and have to sort of give 1 month notice to it. And if when you look at the nitty gritties of this particular law, this is primarily aimed at harassing, and then particularly taking the freedom of choosing the life partner and choosing whom you love from a country which is losing its status to be a democratic country. And also, there's interesting to look at the cow protection bill as well. Uh, Cow is definitely, if not the national, let's say, animal of India, is definitely one of the most, let's say, important animals in India as well. And in certain states, it enjoys the laws and enjoys the rights way more than a girl would have as well, or a woman would have as well. And so far, you know, a number of, let's say, lynching, let's say, incidents have happened, and according to human rights, at least 44 people have been killed so far from May 2015 to the December 2018, out of which more than 36 were Muslims only, in the particular allegation of smuggling cow for their slaughter. So, in the name of cow protection, the fringe groups have been given total autonomy, total freedom in harassing and holding anyone accountable for that. So that's also something very grim. And in terms of linking with the democratic values, you would want to expect that a democratic country would want you to have the freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of, let's say, choosing, freedom of choice and everything. But uh, these particular, let's say, laws and the more, let's say, religious Hindutva kind of thinking is just taking it away from it. Apart from that, I know I've touched upon the not having even a single press conference and everything. Uh, just let's say a couple of months ago, you had the incident where a comedian was arrested for the possibility of cracking a joke on Hindu god and union minister. So it's very unique in terms of it's not that the person has even said something blasphemous, but this particular comedian was arrested because he was supposed to make a joke, or let's say someone got this divine revelation that this comedian is going to abuse or going to talk in sinister ways about the Hindu gods and union minister as well. And that is the tragedy of let's say, times. You also had the incident where a Muslim teenager boy was brutally beaten up for just entering a temple as well, and how it was celebrated by the priests of that particular temple as well. In from the recent, let's say, past only, one of the states called Karnataka, which has the youngest member of parliament from the party BJP, called Mr. Tejasvi Surya, who storms the COVID care center and reads out the names of Muslims working over there, and possibly alleging them for occupying the beds over there. This was a ploy, which was all, let's say, been revealed that it was nothing but just to, let's say, malign the image of a particular, let's say, religious identity. And again, no apology would come later on. Uh, there would not be any action taken, right? Uh, India saw, let's say, a very interesting, let's say, state election in the state of Bengal, where BJP, the current party in power, wanted to just do everything in order to win it, and it wasn't able to win. But the political violence that followed after, and when you look at the kind of misinformation and fake news that followed, that was completely given a communal and sectarian spin. And you also have time and again, not just the prime minister making certain, let's say, derogatory remarks that you can recognize the color of people who create problem by, you can recognize them by the color of their clothes, right? And also in another rally, let's say saying something like this: if there are more burial grounds are made for Muslims, why not to have more crematoriums for Hindus as well, right? You have a few years ago, Union Minister Jayant Sinha garlanding 8 lynching convicts. So these are not, let's say, just people who've been accused of the mob lynching. These are people who were out on parole, who were out on bail, and you have the union minister garlanding them. And apparently just giving out this very subtle message that taking out violence like this and attacking a particular minority would be appreciated by the top leadership. You also have I mean, as recent as we can think about. Uh, so there have been, in Delhi, couple of, let's say, posters been put, which are primarily asking this particular question: that why did Modi send our children's vaccine abroad? And this is because, in terms of achieving a global image by doing this vaccine diplomacy, India did not, let's say, play its card well in understanding the, possibility of how grave the second wave can be. And it exported, more than, I think 60 million doses to more than, let's say, 80 countries, including Canada as well. And now that there is an acute shortage of vaccine and people flock to get themselves vaccinated, but centers don't have it, people have started asking this question. So when these posters were out, you would find in democracy a particular sense where it would be accommodated, and you'd find it being normal that these kind of questions would be asked. But no, cops went out and arrested 25 people, mainly, poor laborers, let's say daily wage earners, rickshaw drivers, for putting up these critical posters for Modi ji, against Modi ji, the supreme leader. You also have the tendency where uh, sedition charges, UAPA, all sorts of these dictatorial, dictatorial, let's say, laws which has been used in order to muzzle this freedom of speech, being used over and over again. And just recently, one of the MLAs from the one of the most populous states of India, called Uttar Pradesh, said that he cannot, let's say, criticize government too much because he would face the sedition charges. And he just apparently wanted to talk about the acute crisis of the resources which the state needed in his constituency. India has also received a very pertinent, let's say, a very, very, very prominent, let's say, status in, being the one of the top countries which banned the internet as well, especially in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which no longer is state right now because it's been stripped out of its special state. The internet ban lasted for more than a year. When you look at the academic freedom, you have in a state called Gujarat, which is the state which I hail from. On January 15th, a revised guideline being sent out by the Center for Holding Online Virtual Conferences and Seminars and Training. And you also have the Gujarat government giving the list of 82 doctoral theses to the universities, to which is basically about the welfare schemes and programs of the state and central government, and just basically asking the people who want to pursue their research in PhD to to do it in these particular ways, on these particular topics, so that in a way they can also use that data and proclaim that, yeah, this is the way development has been done as well. Uh, Also, I mean, obviously, it goes without saying that the Freedom House report recently declared that India has slipped into this position from free to partly free status. And the report talks about in great length as to why it has received such low ranking, and why it's let's say concern not just for the for that being one of the prominent, let's say, democracies in the Southern Asian context, but also for the world as well. And also the Pew Research report suggesting that uh, sorry, Sweden's VDEM Institute describing India as an electoral autocracy as well. And India is sort of on the way of becoming the autocratic as Pakistan, being worse than Bangladesh and Nepal as well. You have the farmers' protest, and I want to, let's say, talk about that particular protest, which is very important to talk in the whole, let's say, retrospect. And certain imagery, certain pictures would make the cases very clear. Uh, so the farmer protest has been, I think, in a way, arguably one of the prominent protests that have happened so far in the history of, let's say, India. And basically, it demands the repeal of three farm laws, which farmers think, which that would make them slave of crony capitalism. Uh, Very important to understand this particular protest in terms of how the dissent and conflicting views has been muzzled as well. Uh, the whole state machinery and resources were poured into in order to in order to stop the protesters from demanding this. And every particular trick in the book was used in terms of also maligning the protesters' image as well. So it, at the time of CA and NRC, it was easy to malign the image because they were Muslims. When it comes to the farmers' protest, uh, the whole protest was portrayed in a way that this is primarily the pro-Khalistani movement, and this is where the funding comes from, and that's precisely why this particular protest is not legitimate, and therefore the demands are not legitimate as well. So this has been one of the characteristics of how any dissenting voice, any voice which sets out itself to protest, is kind of malign, and in order to create this particular narrative and still achieve the a wide range of popularity, so to speak. Apart from that, you have something. I mean, I would definitely call it shameful that a 20-year-old environmental activist called Disha Ravi been arrested on the charges of just simply talking about the protest only. And when Greta Thunberg and Rihanna uh, tweeted about this, the whole, let's say, machinery of the government was busy using this particular, let's say, narrative. I mean, trying to create this particular narrative that this is exactly in order to malign the image of India and Modi, and then it is the internal matter, and it should not be talked about by others outside. Very quickly, I'll also give recognition to the fact that more than 7,000 people have faced sedition charges since Modi has been elected as PM. Now, coming to the point of the COVID mismanagement, which I think a lot of you would want to sort of link it with the way in which the crumbling of democratic values have happened. Uh, when the first pandemic hit, in a very autocratic state, the way even the lockdown was announced was very severe. So India recorded one of the most severe lockdown announcements in its own way, and which led to the major crisis of the laborers migrating to different states. And very interestingly, state doesn't have any data about how many migrating laborers lost their lives as well. It doesn't have data about that. It chooses not to sort of have data about that. Now, India's Prime Minister did not consult key ministers or states while imposing the world's strictest coronavirus lockdown a year ago. And this was, let's say, made evident by the investigation done by BBC. Uh, as the world knows, India faces an acute, let's say, shortage of oxygen as a major resource. Uh, it's very contradictory to also understand that India's oxygen export rose over 700% in January 2021 versus 2020 amid the pandemic. Uh, you would one would wonder as to why, let's say, the second wave hit India so bad. There are multiple reasons for it. And quickly talking about those things, uh, there has been this proclamation done by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, uh, calling out openly that we have defeated COVID without vaccine, and that was being said on April 18th. And then at the Davos, Prime Minister openly also said that India has been able to win the war against that COVID as well. Apart from that, the health minister in the month of, let's say, March said that the end game is close. Well, only, let's say, a month later, the India was about to pick up its second wave, which would turn out to be the deadliest for sure. You have the biggest religious congregation called the Kumbh Mela happening, which invited more than 5 to 6 million devotees to come at the river Ganges, and becoming the obvious super spreader event as well. And while all of this is happening, you would want the officials would want to take care of the vaccine shortage, take care of the shortage of oxygen and remdesivir and other important drugs. But they were allegedly busy with the workshop on effective communication, aiming to create positive image of the government. Now, there have been certain images which we need to look at in order to understand in what particular way COVID has primarily, let's say, hit India. Now, this particular picture by Reuters is something that can give nightmares to everyone. Now, these pieces of clothes at the bank of River Ganges are not just clothes, but there have been dead bodies buried under that. And this is primarily because a number of more than 2,000, bodies were found in the River Ganges or at the bank of River Ganges, primarily because the death rate was so high that poor people simply could not afford any wood for even cremation as well. And it simply led to this particular disaster like that only. And also there's been this particular desire to falsify the number of deaths as well. From March to May, more than 123,000, let's say, death certificates were issued in the state of Gujarat, while on the government records only around 4,000 numbers are there. So, and I probably won't have time to talk about how the government officials have very evidently contributed to the pseudo-scientific and anti-scientific, let's say, baloney, and it just didn't, let's say, embrace the critical and research-based thinking about that. This is really interesting and important in terms of what has been said at different moments by different, let's say, leaders in charge. But you have the Assam's health minister saying that there's no COVID, there's no need to wear any mask, and that was being said on the 4th April. And I think by the time India was registering around 200,000 cases every day. And you have not just the religious congregation, but in the month of April, the election going on in the 5 major states of India, and more importantly, the state of Bengal, because that's the state the current party wanted to be in power, because it hasn't been in power so far. And you have the Prime Minister attending the rallies and proclaiming his happiness for the fact that he hasn't seen such huge crowds at a rally like this. And this is the time when India is registering more than 250,000 cases every day. This particular image is also very important because it sort of talks about in the year 2020 where the Tablighi Jamaat, let's say, particular group was targeted, and looking at the symbolic, let's say, part of this particular picture, uh, what sort of connotations it sort of embodies is very clear to all of us. So while this was a sort of thing for which it was possible for media to hound minority or became the super spreader, which wasn't evidently the case because out of the data which was collected afterwards, hardly 2 to 5% were people who attended the Tablighi Jamaat event were COVID positive. Uh, and this is also very interesting. So at the time when India was kind of observing the relaxation in terms of not having too many cases or number of deaths, it started exporting vaccines even to Canada as well. And then you would have the followers of Modi putting up the posters because they all know that this is exactly what it loves as well, right? Uh, and so paradoxically, right now, India has found itself in a position where it has to become the importer of vaccine, being the country where it has the Serum Institute of India, which is known for being this more than 60% of vaccine production to the whole world. So I think there have been many points and incidents that I can talk about, but I believe we need to also keep the time for the question answer part as well, because if I am talking about the collapse and crisis of democracy, and we're not going to include the question answer part, it would be rather counterintuitive intuitive in nature. Uh, so yeah, I guess I would rest my argument at this particular moment, and would be very happy and excited to talk about or take on to the questions which are out there.
Uh, thanks so much, Milan, for the presentation. So if you folks have questions, please raise your hand. You can ask your questions directly, and then I will unmute you. And if I may ask a question myself, so how do you unpack the notion of democracy, right? So, for example, if we think about India historically before the Modi regime, on the one hand, it has an impressive history of anti-colonial struggles, Nehru, Gandhi, of right democratic policies, and the variety of cultures. And on the other hand, there is economic inequality and the remnants of a hierarchical caste system, right? So in terms of social indicators that are usually associated with modernizing democracies or Western style democracies, can we not say that India is not doing that great? Right, because I mean, mass poverty is a form of exclusion. And I guess the second part of the question is, I mean, why should we assume that Western style democracy is the best model for India? And this is a little bit playing the devil's advocate in the context of conversations about China, right? Because many analysts sort of are impressed or by China or endorse China's model of development on those grounds, right? So there are so many ways of thinking about democracy outside of the realm of governance, right, and separation of powers. Anyways, sorry, it's a long question, but it's something that always uh, occupies my mind. Thanks.
So it's very interesting question, and I think it would sort of take us on the different tangent as to talk about the merits of democracy in order to achieve the economic prosperity or let's say social stability as well. But if one were to look at from the historic, even from the historical perspective, India has always occupied a very special state in the world because it's probably one of the cases for the champions and championing the democratic values, which is non-Western, and it also gave rise to the notion that it's not somehow a privilege to the Western countries as well. You can have democracy despite having completely economically being downtrodden at the time of the independent time as well. Because, having been ruled for more than 200 years, it comes with its effect of what was the GDP that India was able to contribute at the time of the independence of India, and the social, let's say, instability that followed as well. But one were to look at the ethos and tenet and characteristics of India, and I'm not just looking back at Rabindranath Tagore or the founding fathers of Constitution of Jawaharlal Nehru or Mahatma Gandhi, looking at even the Emperor Ashoka or Akbar as well. India has always been this home for the diverse heterodoxy as well, and it has been the home of sustaining the different pluralistic values as well. I mean, if India is, let's say, known for anything, it is known for its inclusion, tolerance, and acceptance of different beliefs as well. And that's what even makes, let's say, in a way, Hinduism very uniquely different from the whole Hindutva, which is sort of in the wake of, let's say, religion, religious, let's say, movement. It's more of the political movement only. So, yes, in terms of the economic prosperity, without even, let's say, trying to sort of think of in an autocratic or authoritarian way, India was able to, let's say, achieve the greater progress in GDP way back in 2008, when the world was, affected by the economic crisis. And at that point, it did not, want to achieve through autocratic way. It had wanted to achieve through democratic ways only. So time and again, India has shown that democracy and the social justice as well as the economic prosperity can be clubbed together. And there can be a harmonious, let's say, coexisting that can be made as well. And can be a shining beacon example for the whole world to look at that, okay, it's not somehow a privilege of the Western countries, that you just don't have to be a rich and prosperous country to be a successfully democratic country.
Thank you. Leslie, if you can unmute yourself. Yep, there you go.
Yes. Hello, and thank you. That was fascinating, and I probably have about 20 questions that I would like to ask. I will keep it to one. There have been a series of leaders in India. Of course, everyone who is in power would like to have the media be lapdogs instead of critical. How was Modi, unlike any of his predecessors, able to co-opt the media so completely, as you documented in your talk?
This is an excellent question. And I think in a way, it has been successfully done even today. I mean, one would wonder that while India has just registered very recently as a country which is the third highest in the COVID deaths, one would expect it's a simple press conference by the supreme leader, by the commander-in-chief to come over here and take the questions. You would have him talk about the positivity, and you would have him talk about, do the radio shows, the very famous radio shows called Man Ki Baat, translated as, the talk of my heart, right? And not taking any flake. And one of the ways it's been able to do it, because the structural, some sort of collapse of the way in which the media system works as well. So allow me to explain. There's a wide segment of, let's say, media that would remain dependent on government ads and the financial, let's say, resources that would, it could receive from it. And hence, because of the conflict of interest, it would not delve into investigative journalism to, talk about the apparent failures of the government as well. And the independent media, or let's say the journalism that you would see, thriving on social media, you would see n number of UAPA, NSA, and all the sedition laws being used at their behest in order to muzzle them out. Now, very recently, two activists from a state called Manipur have been, arrested under the sedition charges. For what reason? The reason for actually just talking about the fact that the cow urine and cow dung do not cure COVID-19. And this is pseudoscientific, this is total mumbo jumbo. And if anything, it would only add to the complications that any COVID patient would have it as well. And you would wonder that in any, let's say, particular country with, let's say, this approach to critical thinking, or this embrace to the scientific thinking, would want to appreciate that, would not want to have them jailed. So even for this apparent reason, this is exactly been out there, that you have the activists who are working tirelessly for environment, for social justice, for everything. You have all these laws and been used at their behest and becoming the shining example of kind of a threat, that okay, this is what it would happen. And in a way, I would not be exaggerating to say this, that if, let's say, Humanist Canada would have asked me to talk about the same topic while being in India, I think I would have refused to uh, not talk about the way in which the freedom with which I have been able to exercise and enjoy over here as well. Right. Prior to this talk, I have already received certain phone calls advising and kind of even telling me in the indirect but very stern and subtle way that this would not bode well with certain professional, let's say, associations I have with institutions and colleges, because there's just one thing which I've done so far in life, which is to propagate critical thinking, and that took me around India, being able to do it for more than 30,000 people in 100 plus workshops and whatnot. And in a way, I know how the air has become. So there's been this fear, which I think this particular government is able to create at a mega scale as well. And apparently, there's also been this tactic used as being called anti-national. So the moment you ask any question, you've been labeled as anti-national, you've been called Pakistan sympathizer, and you're given this one-way free ticket passport to Pakistan. Okay, and then you've been said that okay, this is exactly where you belong. While you just might be just making a very fair, let's say, criticism, or not even criticism, just asking a simple question to the current, let's say, failures, or anything that you want to talk about in a functioning democracy.
Okay, Arjun.
Yes, thanks, Milan. I'm just curious to know, why do you say Hinduism or India has been tolerant and democratic even before independence? From what I see, Hinduism has something very rotten within, right? It never gave priority to equality, individual freedom, or liberty, or even value human life, as I see it. Hinduism is very divisive. It broke up society based on what your profession is, who your ancestors are, and it exploited the weak. Casteism is still prevalent, and this is at the core of Hinduism. Uh, some sections of people are considered children of God, while the other sections are thought of as servants to the others, the upper caste, right? So, and this is very clear to me. Like the past governments in India, the so-called liberal governments, right? They sort of uh, closeted these people, these divisive mindset people, all these years, and Modi has just uh, given these sections of people freedom now, and that's why you see Modi is so popular among masses even now. So
True.
I think we need to reform Hinduism at its core. If not for Hinduism, maybe it's um, secular humanism, which we need to
Absolutely,
proper.
absolutely. And one would want to definitely take this question into the spectrum of theological, let's say, debate and understanding of what independently is right or something worthy of learning from a particular religion called Hinduism, right? Uh, in order to understand the current regime's ideology, it's very important to separate the Hinduism and Hindutva part as well. So, because if one were to understand, let's say, the Hinduism as explained, let's say, by the Mahatma Gandhi, one would know that it's always been the religion of acceptance and, in a way, tolerance. And obviously, it has its vices, for just like any other religions, which needs to be, let's say, addressed as well. But it has never been the religion so far in its phase of Hindutva, which is right now, which wants to dominate some sort of cultural dominance. and some sort of superiority of race as well. Just how you would find the same thing happening in the at the time of World War in Germany, where the Aryan, let's say, supremacy was being desired by, and it was kind of a lust that the country had, and the world knows what followed afterwards. That it just wanted to have the somehow homogenization of a particular identity which is driven by that. Now, one thing which I think is very, very interesting to understand about Hinduism is that it's sort of is millions of other religions in its own as well. So there's no one way that one can even define what it is, right? You can have your prayers during night, you can have your prayers during the morning, or you cannot even, let's say, choose to go to temple as well. You would still be a Hindu, right? There would not be one way or even many ways to define or encapsulate the whole idea or identity of what Hindu is, or what being Hindu is. And that's precisely what this particular ideology was able to encapsulate and sort of harp on the fear as well. And if you were to sort of trace it back to the ideological, let's say, masters, from whom this particular party hails its understanding from, you would have, the person called Savarkar, who propagated this term Hindutva, and who talked about the one nation, two nation theory, where at the time of independence, he wanted how Pakistan wanted to have an Islamic, let's say, identity, and wanted religion to be at the forefront of its identity. India knew the dangers of that. So India knew that even with the, let's say, Hindu majority, it would, if it were to, let's say, embrace any, religious identity, would definitely be creating a disaster, a recipe for social disaster. And I think it has proven its case so far as well. And that's precisely why I think one can, that's why you have this disdain for the whole Hindutva movement. Why? Because it doesn't seem to elevate the status of Hindu or Hinduism in any way. If more so, it sort of denigrates that, and it also does it in a way by using the name of God, Lord Ram, and also Jai Shri Ram as a chant in order to oppress as well. Now, a lot of, let's say, these mob lynching cases, and even at the time of, let's say, the episode of Babri demolition that happened in 90s, you would know that how this particular religious chants were used in order to assert the dominance. So if anything, it has degraded the status of, let's say, Hinduism in particular sense, right? So it isn't, let's say, a Reformation or Renaissance. It is more so in terms of sort of doing the great injustice to it, right? But yeah, again, I completely understand the question that there might be a separate need to look into the caste system and the hierarchy and the elements of patriarchy and all of it. But there has been a very wide, spread this difference which needs to be understood between the Hindutva and Hinduism.
Next question is the crisis of democracy in India similar to other countries such as Russia?
I guess what's happening in India, in a way, can be linked to the fact that it wants to learn a lot from Russia as well. Because how, let's say, there's been all changes made in the constitution to keep Putin as its supreme leader. There is a similar way, the talk of one nation, one election, one thing, everything one, which is a direct, let's say, assault on the plurality and diverse nature of, let's say, what India is known forever. And also, I guess there's been one more connection can be made, is that so in democracy, when you have elections, you definitely want to win election, right? You want to get more and more votes, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, it's always been, let's say, your duty, right? I mean, if you are, in the duty of, in the business of, let's say, running into politics, you have to do that. But no, until now, there hasn't been, let's say, a single party, or there hasn't been a single moment where you would want complete annihilation of opposition. So the current regime not only wants to win election, but it also wants to have the control over what you think, what you eat, what you wear, whom do you love, where you go, and what you hate. And it also wants you to have this complete hatred and disdain for opposition as well. It wants to treat the opposition in a way that all the problems are somehow coming because of them. So there's an apparent, let's say, economic crisis. It happened because of Nehru, right? So in a very idiosyncratic way, in a very logical way, if there's something that goes wrong, well, then it's been labeled on the previous governments and previous parties who were in power. Well, if something good happens, right, you would have the ministers and the supreme leader coming onto it and trying to kind of get all the, let's say, recognition and respect for that. So that is very dangerous, right? I mean, and also, let's say you would see the media sort of having tuned itself in a way where it constantly asks, questions to the opposition as to what you're doing in this and what you're doing in while this particular problem is there. And this, ad hoc reasoning has been permanently used in order to achieve that.
The next question is, do religious organizations and nonprofits pay taxes in India?
There have been reservations where they can be, they are exempted from it. So it is yes. And in terms of, I think this question wants to understand more in terms of how much the religion sort of has its say into the state's functioning, right? Yes. So they do enjoy this particular, donation and economic independence, in their entity and in their identity for sure. Yeah.
Okay, we do have a few more questions. Do you have a moment to take those
Yeah,
as
sure,
well?
sure. We can take a few more. Yeah.
Let's continue. Okay, so from John, why are the opposition parties in India, along with the media, not exploiting the wrongdoings of the Modi government? It is difficult to imagine that they are complicit or entirely suppressed. Are they waiting to get closer to 2024 for the next general elections to start their campaign?
Right. So I think for the point of media, I have already elaborated. But it is very true. Currently, the state of opposition is in its doldrums in terms of not being as outspoken or not being as aggressive as the current party who was once in opposition was. And that is no shying away of the fact that the opposition party doesn't have eloquent leaders who are able to mesmerize people with the audience as well. And also there's been a tendency which can be attributed to it is that with the rise of, let's say, Modi as a political leader, he somehow changed very smartly, very cleverly, changed the parliamentary democracy, which is India, into more sorts of, more sort of the presidential democracy, which is there in USA. So what in order to understand that, one needs to know that in India, you don't directly vote for prime minister, right? Your vote, let's say in US, you can either vote for Hillary Clinton, Biden, or Trump. Your vote directly goes to that. In India, it doesn't happen. You vote for your MLA, MP, your constituency leader, and then all these, let's say, seats put together, it goes to that particular party which has received the majority. Now, with the rise of this particular party in power, it somehow hijack or it still wants to hijack all the elections, and be the election at the center level or at the state level. You would have Narendra Modi going there and becoming the star campaigner, right? You'd have him, despite being the chief prime minister, asking vote for the chief minister, right? So in that particular way, it has created this misinformation in the mind of a larger population that, okay, if I'm going to vote for, if I'm going to cast my vote in, let's say, Bengal or UP, my vote is going to go to Narendra Modi. But that's exactly the flawed structural understanding which has been purposefully created by the party in power as well. And obviously, it's been created because it somehow serves to it, right? And therefore, let's say, in the midst of the pandemic and everything, you would have the election commission obliging the party in power and keeping the election in the state of Bengal in 8 different phases spanning over more than a month period of time, so that the BJP would be able to conduct as many rallies as possible. And the Prime Minister himself would have conducted more than 22 rallies over there, right? And obviously, we talked about the connection to that as to how it's been been detrimental to the number of cases surge that happen in there. But also at the same time, I think largely the media would also be blamed for that as well. Well, you would see that the media, the same media, mainstream media house has been extremely critical of the current regime before 2014. Now they have somehow, remained pretty submissive in terms of not asking any question to the current regime as well, and wants to ask all the question to opposition only. So they have somehow become the spokesperson of the propaganda and the narrative that has been spun by the current party in power, for sure. So in a way, opposition, I would say, would find itself in a very complex situation, complex, let's say, state where there is, if there's, let's say, some grandiose let's say change is not made, it can definitely still not have chance in 2014, because public memory is becoming shorter more and more. Like it already, let's say, somehow in a way people have forgotten about the migrant crisis, right? And then by 2014, I think if predictions are made well, the Ayodhya temple will be built, and one would see the surge of that religious narrative will built on, and trying to sort of forget, trying to let's say just forget all this particular calamity that the country faced during the second COVID wave, especially. So I would say it comes. I mean, the opposition comes into a very complex, let's say, state of situation where it has some blames to be taken on its own, but also, let's say, it's the collapse of the free press, which is also contributing to it.
Okay, Kavya, would you like to unmute yourself? We cannot hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So my question to you is, see, we are talking about different religions and all those things, but don't you think that religion itself is a big problem here when we address things in a scientific way? I think it would be much better to country as a whole, and also, like, I mean, it resolves so many things when we take a scientific approach. Like, say, and is there any hope for atheism in India and scientific approaches in India? I see a lot of decisions based on religion has been made, but not scientific decisions. And like, I mean, we are not like, I mean, see, for example, CAA, you were talking about CAA. So that is again based on religion, like inviting people to India if they are religiously persecuted. But what about inviting other people who take scientific approach to address things like research based? You know what I mean to say is, why not like attract people who think scientifically to India instead of like concentrating only on religion? That is my main question.
That is such a good question, and I think there could be again a separate, let's say, understanding and discussion can be made about how it can be done, because I'm at par with you on this particular question, that, and in a way my professional life is dedicated to that only, in order to pursue the logical, scientific and rational thinking. And to your question about the status of, let's say, atheists or, let's say, non-believers, obviously they don't enjoy any special status, or if anything, they are hounded, or they are sort of persecuted, or in a way right now in India, you have to wear religion on your sleeve. Is this what this particular, at least this particular party in power wants you to have? And everyone wants to go through this litmus test of how much religious you are, and in terms of what color you wear, and your beliefs, the way you align with yourself is there. So definitely, like in a way, it has to not happen, and that's exactly the sort of the expectation of Renaissance, that you would want to have. However, that's where exactly the beauty of constitution, democracy, and secular ideology that India has always had in its gene and tenet becomes very important to understand. That it doesn't want to have these shackles of these religious identity or any identity of caste, creed, consonant, culture, or any particular identity. It wants you to have. It wants you to embrace any identity that you choose for yourself. And that's exactly the way in which the Indian secularism is kind of very different from, let's say, the secularism that one would find in France as well. So say, for example, in France, as you would know, with the ban of the burqa and everything, which is a very extreme form of secularism, in India you would not probably expect something like that, because Indian secularism would be dependent on the neutrality principle, where it would not simply just want to take peek his nose into anyone's business. You want to worship a stone, go ahead, you do that. Okay, you want to worship this god, go ahead and do that. Our job is to simply ensure that no one's harassing you or no one's taking the rights or privileges away from you if you were to do that. And that's exactly the philosophy of the secular ethos and the constitutional rights that the Indian democracy started providing at the from the point of its independence. So yes, in a way, I would definitely agree with you that a progress can definitely only be seen where you have this insurmountable amount of respect for the scientific rigor and value. And I mean, talking about let's say inviting scientists, you have a situation where the recently the virologist, the top virologist in the team of COVID team, which is out there in trying to sort of understand this third wave. He has recently resigned, and allegedly is resigned on the grounds of government not providing or not working on the evidence-based or data-based policy. And you also have the CEO of Serum Institute of India fleeing India, okay, and giving this particular interview talk after being in UK, saying that he got this n number of calls and or whatnot for not being able to provide the number of, let's say, vaccines that was demanded. So when you look at the UAPA, NSA, and this all these particular acts which have been primarily been used, one would know that this any particular thought which sort of goes against the Hindutva or BJP's idea of India, which is India where the Mughal invasion did not happen, where the Britishers, they did, like that never happened, right? It just wants you to go back to the ancient era of sages where everything was perfect, and India had world dominance and whatnot. See that, but and anyone who questions that from a scientific or probably even, let's say, logical point is not respected or appreciated, to say the least, is what I would say. And that's exactly where I took it on a mission to spread critical thinking, not sort of propagating any ideology or anything, but to somehow just talk about the dangers of religious thinking only. Now, Reuters had to come out with the report quite recently, with the videos and photos, talking about the fact that the cow dung and cow piss, which is becoming an increasingly popular method of fending off the COVID-19 virus, and saying that it would only be counter, let's say, productive in terms of becoming susceptible to black fungus and other diseases that one would, get freely, and attributing everything. And even at the time of, let's say, the Kumbh Mela congregation, the justification given by the current, let's say, Chief Minister of Uttarakhand, the state which is very important in this regard, said that by dunking, in the holy river Ganges, one would be able to, shield oneself or safeguard oneself from the deadly coronavirus. So that's, I mean, if anything, the Vision 2020 that once India had in terms of, or what we call the APJ Abdul Kalam's vision, right, in terms of being scientifically, let's say, progressive and all of it, is far from being achieved, is what I can say for sure.
Okay, from Diana, I'm very sorry for everything that's happening in India. Is there anything that we can do?
I think, in a way, I would refrain myself from, saying anything in very didactic way. But I think one has to sort of, I would just urge everyone to look into one's capacity as to, first of all, learn from this particular thing, because at the time of the genocide that happened in World War II, the people did not realize that they were part of this, right? And I guess when I showed you the picture of the number of lives which are being lost and who could not, in a very disrespectful way, could get their final rituals done in a proper way, because cremation is very important to, let's say, Hindu, let's say, ritual, right? And uh, as you saw in the picture, more than 2,000, let's say, dead bodies were floated in the Ganga, and then they found themselves at the bank of the river. Uh, I would simply urge that we understand what's happening right now, and then keep this particular spirit of discussion alive. Because if democracy and secularism and the constitutional values are somehow completely eroded, and they are significantly eroded, but if they are completely eroded and constitution is changed, giving the supremacy to Hindu nationalist believers, right? Then I think you would sort of see the percolating effect into other countries as well, right? So you would rather, in a way, would want the countries to strip off their identity as religion and embrace more of secular identity. But this is kind of going in the reverse way. So I think, in my, let's say, opinion, uh, just keeping this pursuit of critical thinking alive itself would be in cognizance with keeping the identity of what India stands for alive, which is what India stands for: its plurality, acceptance, its embrace to different, let's say, ideology in people as well. Like, I mean, for India, one thing is very common to say that, even if you say something which is overly generic about India, it can never be able to talk about even one part of India, because that's how big it is and that's how diverse it is in the first place.
So maybe we can take one last question from John, who hasn't spoken. So Bengal, Trinamool Congress, Kerala, Communist Party Marxist, Tamil Nadu won the 2021 state assembly elections. Is this a trend that will ultimately see BJP being booted out of power in 2024?
It's too soon to say. Again, as I would predict, the public memory is going to I mean, unless, let's say, this movement is kept alive, say, for example, the CAA protest and farmers movement, and no one talks about these things now, right? And I think, in my estimate, all these things, with the current, let's say, agony that the people are facing, obviously they're angry right now. But this is exactly where, you have to give this credit to the party in power, because it understands the importance of narrative building, right? So at the time of the second, election of the center in 2019, you had the worst attack on Indian Army at Pulwama. More than 40, let's say, Indian soldiers were bombed, were killed in that. And one would think that, okay, that would not bode well with the party who thinks more in terms of its being in big nationalistic and protector of the army and whatnot. But they were able to sort of seduce people's mindset into giving votes to them in terms of surgical strike and whatnot, right? So I think this party, if at all they're good at anything, they would want to come with certain ways in which the narrative would be out there. And it's also happening. I mean, we don't even need to go to 2014. Recently, the prime minister finally started appearing, and apparently just holding the meeting with chief ministers. The chief minister of Bengal has recently also said that, why are you holding this meetings when you don't even let us speak, right? I mean, our mics are muted forever, and not a single question is taken from us. So we're just supposed to listen to you, and then why is it even called meeting in the first place? So I don't think we'll have to sort of wait for 24 as well. But all the anger that is been accumulated right now, I think it will subside, and that might be the tragedy of the election that would be there in 2014 as well, right? But I think if, again, as I said before, if India wants to remain true to what it stands for, it probably wants to learn from what is done enough. So yeah, I mean, one can only hope, but the hope itself is not going to, let's say, lead into any amicable outcome.
Okay, and it is 4:30 on the dot, so thank you so much, Milan, for your informative presentation, lots of angles, and thank you all for the questions. As we wrap up our session, I'd like to remind you that we are supported by membership and donations. So if you would like to contribute to our programs, including the webinar series, you can do so on our website. It's humanistcanada.ca. And if you would like to continue your journey with us, you can also take out a membership on the website as well. And finally, I would like to announce our next speaker on medical assistance and dying in Canada. We will be joined at the end of June by Professor Jocelyn Downey, who is a James Palmer Chair in Public Policy and Law at Dalhousie University, a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada and the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences, and a leading scholar in the field of end-of-life law and policy. So we hope you can join us for that as well. And you can find more information about the webinar on our website and social media platforms, as well as in our newsletter. And thank you all for attending. Once again, Milan, thank you so much. And we hope to see you next time. Stay safe and vaccinated. Bye.